Welcome to Tritech's Perform Software Training Series. In this course of instruction, we're going to be covering the accident diagrammer tool, both in the crash report as well as building templates. The first thing you want to do is to make sure that you can use the accident diagrammer. That's turned on in the department file in police records. To check that, I'm going to go to DB, Department File Maintenance. And I'm going to check right here to see if my accident diagram tool is checked off. If it is not, you need to check it off if you want to use this portion of the software. Also, there's another feature here where I can use Google for my accident diagrammer. We're going to show you the good and the bad of the Google diagrammer. So once that's checked off, F10 will save that information. Now the next step is to go into security. I'm going to go into security, and I'm going to look for security rights involving the accident diagrammer. Security rights can either be given to an individual or by a group. So I'm going to go under my profile. I'm going to go to records, and to search for those diagram security rights, I'm going to go under the search bar, and I'm going to type in the word diagram. I'm going to search the rights and notes, and here are the accident diagram and template security rights. You can see there's not many of them. Now each one of these is important to give out depending about how in-depth you want these accident diagrams to be done. What I'm going to do to show you the full features is I'm going to give us all of the security rights involving the accident diagram, not only creating the templates, but actually using it in your crash report. So to create your templates, again, I'm back in police records. I'm going to go to DB, and I'm going to go to template maintenance and narrative settings. This is where I'm going to create my accident diagram templates. Now just for note that we cannot access the old diagram templates. The old templates are not sustainable in a Windows 7 environment, and those departments that are sending their reports off to the state electronically, those diagrams that you created will not show up on those reports. So it's imperative that you make sure that you are using the new diagrammer if you're sending your reports electronically. So to create a template, you can see now I'm going to go down here to the template, and that's the code file, and I'm going to create a code for this particular intersection. And you can create these at all your unique intersections in your town. You can create generic ones where people can go ahead and make additions or deletions into it, depending about how serious you want to be to making these diagram templates. So I'm going to create one. It's going to be at the intersection of South and Main Street. And F10 to save that. My diagram editor is going to open up. Now if you look at my page, you can see here that I have a white area. This is called the canvas. This is the area that the state, and depending on what state you're in, gives you to place that diagram on your crash report. Some states have a larger area, some have smaller. Over here on the left is my toolbox. I have a symbols library where we can create and add symbols into our diagram onto the canvas. We have roads, vehicles, people and animals, signs, lights, arrows, and a miscellaneous tab. We can insert rectangles, and to insert an object into that canvas, I would left click once on that object and then left click again on the diagram. Now it'll give me a rectangle. Now each one of these objects can be made larger by grabbing one of the four corners, the blue squares, or I can spin it by left clicking and holding on one of these gray circles. I have the ability here to do a lot to it. Okay? Again, I can make it larger, and I can make it smaller. Now to remove an object on your diagram, all you have to do is have it selected. You can see there's a blue adorner around it. To remove that object is I just hit the delete key on my keyboard and it'll remove it. We have circles and ellipses. I want to bring a circle or ellipse into my diagram. I left click and it brings it in as an ellipse. I bring it a little smaller and I can make it a circle, such as looking down on a utility pole or a light pole. Lines, I'm going to insert a line, left click and hold, and I can put a line into my diagram. Now as you can see, it's a very narrow object. Over here on the left hand side we can zoom in on our object. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in 175%, and it makes it a little bit easier for me to be more specific on the size and location of that arrow or that object that I place in. Curves, bringing a curve in here, all I can say is that it will take a little bit of practice, but if you're creating a curved roadway, I'm going to left click and hold one of these corners, and I'm going to make a radius that I feel comfortable with. Left click inside the object and hold, and it gives you the ability to move it. Now if I like this radius and it works well for me, I can right click inside and copy that radius. So then I right click again and I paste, and it brings an exact duplicate of that radius. Now again, if you're drawing a road, usually roads don't have that exact radius, but I can go ahead and make some changes to make it work. Okay. So if that's a curve in your town, I've just created that curve. Text box gives you the ability here to enter in text. What it does, when it creates that text box, it's going to say the word text box inside it. To remove the word text box, I just click inside that box and I type in the name of the street that I want to put in there. And again, I can make it a different size to fit as I want it to fit. And I can place it where I want it to be. Okay. Now, when you see a blue adorn around it, that means that object's been selected. To unselect it, you can either left click outside the diagram or choose this unselect button, which I think is probably the best way to do it. Again, here's my zoom factor. Okay, my canvas can be normal. I can make it larger, I can make it smaller. And then I can put a grid in here if I want. Again, most of these diagrams that you place on an axis aren't to scale and really shouldn't be placed on a grid. Now that's the left side toolbox. Now on the right hand side we have some other tools that we can use for our diagram. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make this back to normal size, so I'm going to remove the zoom and bring it right back to where I want it to be. Now in the upper right hand corner I have templates, and this is where you can select templates in your crash report. Right now I can't select them because I'm creating one, but we're going to show you how to select it from your crash report. Your text field, you can change the font and the size. The defaults work well in most crashes, so I don't think you need to change that. When I upload the brushes, you're going to see here that it gives me the ability to add color or to fill or to do a border a different color. Why would you use color? Well, I know not many departments actually print out their accident reports in color, but let me give an example. If you wanted to put a building as an object in your crash report, if I bring in a rectangle, you can see here that it's just a rectangle. But if I fill it with color, and to do that, I have the object selected. I come over here to the right hand side to my color palette. Okay? I can move this up and down to get the right hue that I want, and I just really want to fill it with black. And then I just click down here and it fills it with black. So it makes it look like a solid object. So that's filling that object with black. And I can do the outside, which is the border. I can change the border to a different color if I wanted to. Okay. It's hard to see. Let me fill it with white. And then the outside here, you can see that border change. So that's the only reason why I'd use color. Now the appearance down below here gives me the ability to change the opacity of a object. So if I place a vehicle on my object, on my diagram, okay, and I change the opacity, it kind of gives it kind of ghost-like appearance. You might use that for your showing movement of the object. The stroke allows me to make my lines thicker. I can make it a dash line, a dot line, a dash dot, or a dash dot dot line. I can go ahead here and change the end caps to flat, square, round, or triangle. Okay, and then I can do here the line join meter beveled around. Okay, then the meter limit will give you that ability. And then the start line cap, I can make it flat, square, round, or triangle. So I'll give you an example. If I want to make this opacity 100%, and then I want to go ahead here and remove it from being a solid line to a dash line, you're going to see how that looks. And the layout allows you to move objects based upon where your cursor is. If I want to change the layout, I can. Okay. Very few departments do that because it's so much easier just to move the object where you want it to be. You can rotate things by angle. You see here as I add an angle, you watch that it rotates that angle. Okay. Scale 1 to 1, the X and Y is at 1 to 1. Skew X and Y usually is defaulted at 0, 0. So there's an awful lot of features to this that can really take a lot of time, where an officer could spend an awful lot of time putting together an accident diagram, when really most of the time, and again, I'm not saying all the time, but most of the time it's a minor crash, two-vehicle crash. Basically, your state requires a diagram for that. So let's create a four-way intersection template. I'm going to go to Symbols, and I'm going to go to Roads. And of course, we have roads built in here. Here's my four-way intersection. I'm going to left-click to select it, left-click in the object where I want it to be. Now you want your object to be in the canvas, not in the grayscale area. You want it in the canvas. And you place it where you think it should be. Now what I like to do, because I'm creating a template, and this way it looks a little bit more visible, is I think that the thickness of these road edges is a little bit too thin. So I'm going to change the thickness from a 1 to a 3. So it gives it a little more definition. Now this object can the only way you can change it is you can make it wider, shorter. Okay, and the aspect ratio kind of gets lost when you do that. So again, it's going to be up to you on how you want to do that. Now when I'm building a template, I like to zoom in, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. Okay, and I'm going to add line. I'm going to make this road a little bit longer, because everybody knows at this intersection, most of the accidents happen in this area. So to add a line, I'm going to click Add Line, and I'll place a line close to where I want it to be. Then I'm going to left click and drag it onto where I want it to be, and I'm going to make that a thickness 3 to match. Okay. And again, it's going to take a little bit of practice to get it exactly how you want it to be. If I'm happy with that line, I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to paste it. So I get an exact line, and then place it over here. Unselect it, double check, and get it right where I want it. Now we have, under the symbol library, we have some yellow lines. Sometimes the yellow line is a little too large for this object. So what I like to do, when I do a center line, I just make a line. And I'll place my line here for my center line. I want to make sure that it's straight. You can see here that it's off a little bit. Left click on the corner there, the end. And there we go. Create another line here. Another line here. And what I want to do is I'll create one more line down here. And I'm going to put a stop line here because this is where the stop sign is. So I'm going to do one more line, place my line here, and I'm going to add some thickness to it to get it how I want it to be. So there's my stop line. Now you could do a rectangle, that way it doesn't get filled with object, it does get filled with a solid color. You could do a rectangle that way as well. Okay, so there's my stop line. Now I'm going to go back to my symbol library. I'm going to add a sign, I'm going to add a stop sign. Left click on the stop sign, bring it in, and place the stop sign where I want it to be. Copy that again and place a stop sign on this side. Spin that thing around. And again, it's just indicating where the stop signs are. And I could fill it with red if I wanted to, just to show that it is a stop sign. Again, we're not printed in color, but it just shows depth. So if this is my intersection, and the intersection is South and Main Street, if I'm happy with the general layout, now I'm going to put in some details. One of the first details I'm going to put in is I'm going to put a north directional arrow. So I'm going to go to Symbols Library, I'm going to open up my signs, lights, and arrows, and I'm going to pick my north directional arrow. And I like to put it in the corner, kind of out of the way. Now, is that an accurate representation of north? Might not be. So I'm going to spin it and make sure that I identify exactly which way is north. This is important in your crash diagrams to delineate north direction. Now the vehicles. Most of my vehicle crashes are, of course, two vehicles, two automobiles. You don't have a whole bunch of motorcycle pickup trucks. But we're going to put in what, we're building a default template here, so most of our crashes are two vehicle crashes. So I'm going to bring a couple of vehicles into my template. Left click on vehicle and just place it over here. Left click again and place it over here. So there are my two vehicles involved in my crash. Just want to make sure that it looks about right in my scale. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to my text box and create two text boxes. One with the number 1 in it. I'm going to make it a little smaller so it's more manageable. Left click and drag it over here. And I'm going to create another one with the number 2 in it. Make it a little bit larger here. And put the number 2 in it. Now what I'm doing is remove the word text box. I'm just clicking inside that box. And I'm going to drag that number 2 right over here. So my goal is when the officer does the crash report, he's going to place vehicle 1 where it final rest or where the incident took place, vehicle number 2, and then slide over 1 and 2 on top of those vehicles. Now of course I've got to put my roadway information in here. So I'm going to go to text box. Again, I like to work outside the object just so I don't accidentally keep doing this all day long and start moving that object. So I like to work outside of my diagram or the symbols that I've placed on it. So one of the roads is called Main Street, and this is Main Street. And I can put it off to the side and have the officer slide it on where he wants it to be. And I'm going to create another text box because the other road was called South Street. And I'm going to put South Street right there. So what I've created is a basic template for the intersection Main and South Street. I've placed the two vehicles in there. I've got the numbers 1 and number 2. Now, if your department or your agency or your state wants you to show direction of travel, well, let's create some arrows to show direction of travel. So I'm going to bring an arrow in here. Again, symbols, signs, lights, and arrows, and I'm going to grab that blue arrow and drop it in here. Now what I like to do with arrows, I like to fill them with color, with black. And once I've created one, I copy and paste. Again, copy and paste. Okay. Now that doesn't mean I can't copy and paste when I bring up the diagram in the crash report, but I like to have a few in there just so the officer will get his idea. Oh, I've got some arrows, I got to show direction of travel. Basic diagram. Now I can be a little bit, fancy, and I can put a tree in here. Okay, I can put a fire hydrant, railroad tracks, a little fire, a little ice. I can put people. Okay, but basically, I want a nice, basic, simple diagram to work on for vast majority of my crashes. Now, once I've created this template, I'm going to save it. I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to save it. And now that accident diagram template is there. Now, an officer has to do a crash report. I'm going to go into my case management, and I have a crash report right here that is not complete. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring this case up for my case management and click Edit Case. Now this is the Massachusetts crash report. Each state has a different look, but they're all kind of the same. We have the ability here to have the spot for our diagram being done, whether it's a tab up top here, this is diagram, or it's on the back of the first sheet or on a third sheet. So I'm going to click back, and this is where I'm going to access my diagram. Here's my canvas. To open that up, I double click, and it brings me to the accident diagrammer. Now, there also is the ability to use Google Maps. So for those of you who have Google Maps. So I'm going to show you how Google Map works. What this did, this accident happened on Main and Pine Hill. What happens is that it'll go ahead and look exactly where that should be on the Google Map representation. Now what I want to do is, if I'm happy with this Google Map, I just zoom in, and I'll always put that point just about in the middle. And you can see here, when you're looking at the Google Map, this is the center line. This is not the entire road. This is the center line. You can see over here are the edges of the road. Depending on how rural your area is, sometimes these edges are hard to see or are not there at all. So I zoom in to what I feel is going to be a good representation of my crash. Once I've zoomed in where I'm happy with it, I just click on this icon here. I'm going to save the map, and it's going to install it onto my diagram. Okay? Again, we've got a little point here. This is the lat long for that intersection or that roadway where Google says it is. And basically I've got this big wide center line. Okay? But I could use this if I so choose. I just have to go to Symbols, insert my vehicles where they were in this crash. So I'm going to move these two vehicles where I think they should be. And I change the north directional arrow, that's appropriate. Then I'd have to put a vehicle number 1 and a number 2 on top of the vehicles to identify the two vehicles. So that's using the Google Maps. So I'd go here to text. I'd put in the number 1 here. Whoops. Make it a little bit smaller to manage it. Left click and drag and throw it on top of vehicle number 1. Do the same thing here. Text box. Number 2. And slide it on top. Now another thing you can do with an object, let me throw a tree in here. I'll put a happy little tree in this crash. Or a brush. Now see how the tree is on top of the vehicle? What I can do with any object that I put in here is I can right-click inside it and send it to the back. And now the vehicle is on top of the tree or the brush pile. Okay? Or I can go ahead here and bring it to the front. So I can go ahead and put objects on top of each other. Now, for a tree, really not possible, but if you do like a skid mark or some type of yaw mark here, like if I have a skid mark here, and I want it to go to the front tire, okay, I'm going to keep this to the back, and so that way it's hidden in the back underneath the car and not on top of it. And there's that line there. Oops. Now, to use the templates, let me exit out of here. I'm not going to save that. To use the templates in the crash reporting, I'm going to bring up my diagram, and I select my template over here. Okay, and there's that one I just created called South and Main Street. I click on it, and even if there's nothing in that canvas, it's going to give you this warning, because there's always a north directional arrow. So applying this template will overwrite any work you've done. Or if this is an existing diagram, the diagram will be overwritten by this template. Do you want to continue? If I say no to this, it will not insert that template. But I do want it, so I'm going to say yes to that. And then there's my template. So to create this diagram, is I drag and put vehicle number 1 where I want it to be. Vehicle number 2, drag it and spin it where I want it to be. I take the number 1 and I place it on top, vehicle number 1, and I do the same thing with number 2. Okay. Now for you to see it a little better, I'm going to zoom in again at 150%. That's a little better. And then I can put my arrows where I want to show direction. And I put Main Street here and South Street here. And that's how quickly a diagram can be done using the diagram templates, giving the tools the objects that you're going to use most of the time. Now an example would be, is we're saying that this vehicle number 2 wasn't a vehicle, it wasn't a car, it was a truck. So let me move the number 2 off of it. And all I do is delete that vehicle out of here, and then I insert one that I want that's more representative of that vehicle. So this was a pickup truck. So I just remove the object that was on my template and put in the one that I want. Then when I go to drag the number 2 over on this, watch what happens. It goes underneath. Right click, bring to the front, and now the number 2 is on top of the pickup truck. I'm going to save that, and now that diagram template now is going to be saved here. You see the north directional is here, and in Massachusetts you can see that this indicates north there. So the Google map is a good idea. It has some limitations. The templates are really the way to go, I think, to get the crash diagram done quickly. So the officer's not spending a lot of time on the diagram. We can get that diagram done quickly and get him back on the road without having to spend too much time on his report. But it gives you a good representation of that crash. And that is using accident diagrams, using the templates, and using Google Mapping.